the whole Ritchie Valens phenomenon, and that's what it is. It's a phenomenon because in like really 8 months, the guy had 4 top 50 records, and he became an international icon. Why? Because La Bamba wasn't the hit at that when he died. It was like 22 on the charts, and when Donna was number 2. And that's another thing. Like you know, in those days, he was a one-hit artist, and he didn't mean anything to anybody except to the disc jockeys and the kid that had just been introduced to him. So the minute he died, they stopped playing his record. Donna went from number 2 to nothing because they didn't want to play a dead artist. And that's the way it was. He wasn't like, if Presley died, they kept playing his stuff because he was an institution by that time. And also other acts that had been killed prematurely, they had already a track record and they had a big audience, they had a big fan base. But Ritchie didn't have any of that. How come he became an international icon when he didn't have that? Didn't have it. That's really a story. That is a story.
All right, Richie. We're going to do it the same way this time. Sing it. It doesn't make any difference.
Look, the guy's coming with me. That sounds dead.
The very beginning?
Yeah.
No, it's terrific the way it is. Look, Richie, it doesn't sound anything in here like what it sounds out there, so don't worry about it, believe me. We got echo on it and everything here. Here we go. Take 8. 2, 1, 2.
I was born March the 9th, 1937 in Los Angeles, California. Ritchie was born in May the 13th, 1941. He was also born in Los Angeles. I'm 4 years older than Ritchie.
Well, I was born in San Jose, up north, and I was raised like poorly, I guess, living in camps, berry camps, and prune orchards and old houses, just going out there and just picking up crops in my younger life.
One of my aunts married one of my, Richie's aunt married into the family too. It was my family and Richie's family. So that's how it got started there, that I knew Richie. And I knew him at 3 years old. His dad, he was retired and he had diabetes real bad. And he used to run a farm, like a farm ranch there in Pacoima. And then his mother, she was a waitress.
I was 12 years old. Ritchie was 8 years old when my mom and dad separated. And Ritchie stayed with my dad and I went with my mom. And we were, I'd say about for 3.5 years, you know. He was with my dad and I was with my mom. Plus I was made a ward of the court and I was sent to Rancho San Antonio, which is the boys' town of the West. I was there for three years, or close to 3 years.
I was living in San Fernando, California. And Richie's dad lived in Pacoima, and Richie's mom lived in San Fernando also, with the grandmas.
That's when my dad passed away, and I got out a little early so Ritchie could come home. I hadn't seen Ritchie for a while, so when I went to the funeral, me and Ritchie met at the funeral, so Ritchie told me that he wanted to come back home, and he was living with my dad's niece and nephew in Long Beach. So he wanted to come back home, and he said that he'd come back, but he wanted me to be there. So And I wasn't sure when I was getting out, but I got out about 2 months after that.
Connie's sister happened to go live at a berry camp we were living at, you know, my family. Her name was Rosa. So she got there and she was there with her kids and her husband, and they started, you know, picking berries and all that. So maybe about a year later, I guess Rosa told her, well, come on down, you know, there's a lot of money to be made over here. Bring your kids and everything, and everybody can. Well, that's the way it was before. You went out there with a family and you earned your money. You could earn more money with a family than by yourself. So that's what Connie did. She needed money, so she took all her kids over there. And it happened that they got there to the berry camp, and that's how we met Bobby and Richie.
I never thought we were poor. I mean, we probably were, but I just accepted it as a way of life.
Really poor, but really happy. We had everything, you know, even if we were, you know, I mean, there'd be things when they see us now, we drive new cars, we had this. They think that we were like that when we were really young, and we weren't. You know, my mom worked sometimes in the fields, and, you know, Richie worked with my mom in the fields. My brother, I remember picking prunes with my aunt and my uncle, Pete and Rosa. And, you know, I think we had a real hard life. My mom worked real hard.
He was a happy-go-lucky little boy, happy all the time. Chubby, oh, he was really cute, you know, I say cute. But his mother always thought he was overweight. But turned out to be a beautiful, handsome man.
Well, he was, just the average little kid, brother, you know.
He was just a happy-go-lucky kid. Just everything was a laugh. Everything was funny. Everything was, you know. He used to play around with Bobby a lot, wrestle with him. And well, Bobby would just get the best out of him, but he would never cry. He would always be laughing, no matter what he did to him. I guess he figured, you know, he wasn't going to cry, so he was laughing every time he used to wrestle.
I mean, who didn't fight with their brother? Who didn't have rivalries with their brothers? Everybody has.
Well, to be honest, for 21 years, I had a heavy alcohol problem since I was 14 years old. And I quit drinking in 1973.
And I packed my bags and I just went with him to LA. And then I met Bobby where he was living at in Fillmore. And I stayed. And that was it.
He went to live with his uncle Felix up in Carmelita, up there towards Santa Ana. And he lived with him for a while. And then he came back to stay with his mom, and that's where he started his career. Yeah, but he was mostly living with his Uncle Felix, because the mother, she couldn't afford to keep him, you know, and she sent him to school over there.
We moved a lot. We were always moving around.
We lived in a little house on Gain. I remember that little house on Gain very well. And it was just a one bedroom. I remember my mom putting Bobby and Richie down underneath the house. It was a little cellar. But it was a nice, clean little cellar. It was very neat.
He had his Aunt Ernestine, and she was, I think he kind of lived with her for a while. He had the family, and they had, of course, the Latin people, they are family, period, and they stay together and live together, and so I think he was pretty well balanced, actually.
Mama was working, or Richie was taking care of us, or we had an aunt there with us.
I took care of them. I took care of Connie and Irma when they were, I don't know how old they were, maybe 5, 6, around there. Because I went to live with them when I was in 1955.
We lived in Pacoima, a small little house my mom had bought. And but see, I was separated from Rosie, so I was living with Richie and my mom.
As far as Richie and her were so close, you wouldn't believe how close they were.
She was a hard-working woman. She tried to do the best for her kids. So way back then, it was just like nothing, just making ends meet.
She was your best friend. She was loyal. She was dignified. She was a great woman.
And a dad too.
Oh yeah, she was our mom and dad. She said, "You don't need a dad. I'm your mom and dad," and she was.
He started playing with the guitar, I think, around 4 or 5 years old. He started, dragging a old guitar around.
He used to have like a little box guitar made out of cardboard, and then my uncle John Lozano gave him a guitar, and from then on, playing the guitar all the time, playing the guitar left and right. No music lessons whatsoever. Of course, the mother couldn't afford it, music lessons, but everything was by ear. He did everything, whatever he heard, he'd follow up on it.
He used to ask me, but, he said, "Rosie, what do you want me to play for you?" Again, I used to love that song, that Searching. Who the Coaster sing that or something? Yeah. He used to play that for me. I used to like it, so he used to play it for me.
He had a guitar, and I'm not sure, I think it was the Fender, and he would open it on the bed, and he would sit there tuning it or polishing it or whatever he was doing with it. And I remember just sitting there watching him and kind of laying him back and just running my hand inside on the velvet because it was so soft.
He used to be taking his guitar to school, and I tell him, "Why are you dragging that damn thing along with you for?" Little bit I know.
I had a fan of mine, a Greek fellow who was in the aircraft parts manufacturing, and he used to follow me around. And one night he mentioned to me, "Let's start a record company." Now we're talking about 1956. There were 4 major record companies in the whole United States. So he said, "Let's start a record company." I said, "Are you kidding?" To me, that was the furthest thing from my mind. So anyway, the money came in so fast that all of a sudden I went down and all the locks were changed on the doors, and I hadn't been able to finalize my contract with this guy. So that went into a lawsuit, which didn't go anywhere because I ran out of money, and so that's the beginning of the record business for me. So I said to my wife, she was a comedian, she was on Capitol Records at the time. I said, "What are we going to do?" We didn't have any money, and I'm not going to play joints anymore with the clarinet. I couldn't stand that anymore, and that's what I was relegated to. So I said, "Well, let's start a new record." She said, "We'll start a new company, and we'll find some guy in the aircraft parts business that this guy represented, who he screwed in that business, and he'll put up the money." That's exactly what we did. I look back on my life and I say, God forbid I'd still be locked up with Keane Records. And if it hadn't been for him, I never would have discovered Ritchie Valens, Sam Cooke, Barry White, Bobby Fuller, you name it, So who knows? And that was the biggest lesson of all, that you never know. Everybody thought that Delphi Records was a monster company out here. I don't know why, because we were exotic, I guess. And I had my secretary come up the stairs in my front offices, and she was up there, and maybe one other guy, and I come in the back, and I'm back there in another office in the studio, but there's nobody there hardly. He says, "Where the hell are all the people?" Because in Chicago, there's records stacked up to the ceiling. It's a whole different bag back in the East, because that's where it started. And this was the West Coast. So I did things the West Coast way. I really liked producing and putting things together musically, and that's when I started going down into the east side of LA, where all the Latins were at that time, and even down into the ghetto area for the blacks. And the first records that I produced were all black, or they were mostly Latins.
In those days, there were some dominant radio stations and, of course, TV dance parties, and you got the record on those stations and on TV shows. In a week's time, you'd be able to tell if it was going to be a hit or not ordinarily. I got a lot of my reading, my feel from the record hops. That's why I like doing them. I could go out there and play a record and see if anybody liked it or not, dance to it.
In those days, if you sent a record to a jockey, he would listen to the first 3 grooves. And if it didn't get you, forget it.
And that was always sometimes kind of a tough decision to make, you know. If you want to play the record because you like the record promoter, or if the record had it, or what.
That era of the late 50s and we're moving into the 60s was just at the end of the infamous payola era. And some people may recall, although the younger folks won't recall that, the disc jockeys used to take money in trips and gifts and other questionable things to play records in order to promote them and get them to the top of the charts. And the record companies were part of this whole collusion, so to speak.
Most of the records that were sold in '58, the singles, went to the jukebox operators. I would say 80% of all your sales went to jukebox operators. And that was controlled by the mob, of course, with their beer. They had the beer. They had the trucks that delivered the beer to the joints. If you don't put my jukebox in, you don't get no beer.
In the 50s, it was real easy to lose everything that you had and not end up getting paid much. The people that were in the music business were the record companies and the promoters. Musicians knew nothing about business. We were tickled to get to play someplace, and for somebody to record it and then play it on the radio was a real big thrill for us.
We were playing Bill Haley, Elvis Presley, Chuck Berry, and it was there, the trend was there. I could tell it, a lot of guys could tell it.
And rock and roll then was not all that rocking and all that rolling. Some of the music was heavy. Some of it was the Chuck Berry sound or the Bill Haley and the Comet sound. But we also had the Connie Francis. We were still playing Sinatra.
In those days, of course, and back there was no such thing as a record business. It was just personal appearances, like they have a little group, they played high school, that kind of stuff. And that's what Ritchie Valens was doing. He'd walk on the school grounds and play his guitar, and pretty soon he'd have over 50 kids following him around like the Pied Piper.
He met Gil Rochard Silhouettes, and my mom helped him put that dance together, the first one at the Veterans Hall in San Fernando.
We had given a dance to raise money. Connie did, my sister-in-law, at the American Legion in San Fernando.
I was there that night. He performed at the American Legion. And I remember sitting on the stage, because we were little, and here were all these teenagers, so we wouldn't get mobbed. And I remember sitting on the stage and watching him perform. And I remember looking out at all the people and wondering why they were acting so crazy. Because I kept looking at them and looking at, Ritchie, like, why are they doing this? That's just Ritchie.
And I was at the front door because I guess we were getting the hats or the coats or the tickets or whatever it was, and I couldn't see because I was short and I couldn't see him very well on account of I had to look over all these other people, so I couldn't see him, but I could hear him. And then I used to go around it, and I had to go see him and decide to believe it was him. And then I was just amazed because I didn't know he could sing that well. And he used to sing at home with just a plain acoustic guitar or whatever, but it sounded way, way different when he was up there on stage.
When I first set up my offices, I had my business cards, of course, and this young fellow who brought me my business cards from the printer. And he was from Pacoima, which is where that was Valens' home. And as he left, he said, would you be interested in hearing a kid, they call him the Little Richard of San Fernando, which is where Pacoima is, in the San Fernando Valley. I was leaning toward R&B because I really liked R&B. The black guys, to me, they were the greatest musicians, and I lived with them practically ever since I could play a clarinet, and I really respected them. And anything that had anything to do with their kind of music, I was excited about that. And I said, anybody connected with Little Richard, I'd love to hear him. And that's I went out the following weekend and saw him do an early morning matinee for the kids out there, which was something he did every week, and that's how I met him. I walked into this theater about 12 o'clock noon, and it was just nothing but kids. And the lights were up, and there was this bull-like young Latino guy up there with a little raunchy amplifier banging away and just playing a bunch of riffs and stuff, but really exciting. But the kids were going nuts. He took me out to his home in Pacoima, and it was a house on mud sills, a little one-room house. And he was sleeping under the house with one of his cousins. And so at that point, he was saying, gee, I would sure hope if we're going to record that I can buy my mother a new home, because he could tell, you know, that was a bummer. So then, of course, we had to go down in California at that time. In order to make a contract legal, you had to have it approved by the Superior Court. So we went through that with the mother and everything. There was no problem. And she was very happy because he wanted her boy to be, you know, wanted to get out there with his music like any other mother would. And here's a guy, you know, a record company coming to the door and saying, hey, I want to sign your son. And somebody asked me once, they said, well, why did you sign him? I said, because I didn't know what the hell I was doing. Because I wasn't looking for anybody. What are you going to look for? There's nothing out there. I mean, there's nothing there that you could say, oh, that's it, because that's what's going to sell. I had no idea. All I had was what I felt I liked. If I liked it, I would release it. I had him come up to my home, and I had a little recording set up there with a 601-2, which was the first stereo portable equipment that was on the market. And I had two Telefunken microphones, which are the state of the art. I mean, Sinatra did all his stuff on those, and they were it. And the only stereo that we have on Ritchie Valens I made at my home with that outfit. And I just sat him down. I said, let's hear what you got to say. And then we went in and we recorded Come On, Let's Go and framed, and after that. Getting into the studio is one of the big problems in recording. You know, you have a demo, and you go in and you do something with a couple of instruments, and the kid that's doing the song is really feeling it, and you really get it. Now you're going to take him into a studio in a really controlled conditions, and you have musicians behind him, and you have something that's already set there that he didn't have anything to do with. And are you going to get it, or are you not going to get it? And most of the time, that's what makes a great guy in the studio, is that he can get that out of the singer. He can go from the demo to a finished song and still retain what the guy's trying to say. And with Ritchie, it was easy because he sounded and did the same thing with the band that he did with his guitar. The studio was chosen by the band, by Renee Hall, because he'd done a lot of recording there. So that's why we went to that studio, and it turned out to be the right thing to do. It was great because the vibes and the engineer were great. And then the arrangements mostly were done by the same band. I used the same band for all of his stuff. And Renee Hall was the guitar player, arranger, and Earl Palmer, who just came out with a book. And Earl Palmer was just initiated in the Hall of Fame for all of the hits that he was on. And I used Earl on all my stuff. And that was the stroke of genius that I had, which I can't take credit for it. It's just that I really loved the way those guys sounded. So when I went looking for a band, I went for the black guys. Mostly with recording with artists, it's that their attitude is very important. How cooperative they are in the studio. Do they want to, you know, or are they a big ego trip and they want to do it their way, and or you're fighting the engineer? We didn't have any of those problems with Ritchie because he would do exactly what I told him to do.
Richie, when you get to that chorus, boy, give her hell, Daddy.
Okie doke.
Here we go. Let's kick it off. Take two.
Well, now my baby's gone. Come on and say I broke a string.
He knew what he wanted to do, and he could do it well. Everything that he did, we worked on together to develop the song. Well, that was my job as a producer. If I wanted to record this guy, I mean, he didn't know anything. I mean, and I don't mean it in a derogatory way. I mean, he'd had no experience, period. He wouldn't know the first thing to do.
But does that sound like you won?
99% of the people that buy records are tone deaf, number one. which is a bold statement, but it's true. A lot of people, you know, don't know whether you're on key or not.
I always was yelling at him, come on, let's go, let's go.
What is it about a hit song? It's something. It's either a sound or a lyric or the combination of it or the sound of the man's voice or the girl's or the performer. But mostly it's like in a title or it's in a hook.
My mother always used to say, come on, let's go, Richie.
I'm a great believer in hooks.
Come on, let's go, Richie.
Come on, let's go happened in like 3 weeks. We started at home, okay, right here in LA. And I took the record up to KFWB, which was the #1 station. And they liked the record. It's a hit record. I mean, it's my favorite record of all time that I've done. I've done a lot of big ones, but that Come On, Let's Go has got that hidden thing that nobody can, it's just so exciting. Like one disc jockey said, after the picture came out, they said, yeah, you can play Los Lobos, you can play whatever, but when you put that needle in, boy, he said, it jumps. That's got it.
No, I just remember everybody really being happy that my brother was going to make records. He was going to make his music that he loved so much, that his dream was coming true. And we were coming along for the ride.
Energy. Good grief. You listen to it, it's just filled with that youthful energy that you can see that the young man was so focused when he recorded that too.
I love you so.
Come On, Let's Go was a hit record. And, you know, everybody's saying you can't go in the record business today unless you got at least $500,000 to waste. And in those days, and I keep saying, well, if you had a hit record, you don't need any money. A stone smash, we used to call it.
I remember hearing his song the first time, me and my mother, and we were in the car, and actually, I don't know why, but I was sort of like embarrassed, you know.
I couldn't believe that that Richie was singing on the radio, in the car, you know, going down the street, and we'd turn the radio on, and it was him.
I don't know, it's like it was Come On, Let's Go. I didn't think Come On, Let's Go was gonna, you know, take or go up the charts the way it did, you know. But I had to eat it again.
And then fortunately, we had the annual Pomona Fair, Southern California Fair. And the disc jockeys in those days, each one had his own show. They did their own promotion, their own dances, and they were like, they were in business for themselves. And they were almost like on lease to a radio station. And so KFWB had a booth out there at the fair, of course, and the jockeys took their turn, and they'd spend a couple hours out there with their show at the booth. And so I made a deal with them. I said, here, I'll put Richie out there and he'll perform for you because I know that 50% of the people who are going to show up are going to be Latin. And this is the first Latin guy that's happened in rock and roll, and we really got support from the Latins here in Los Angeles. And he was a big star overnight with them because he was their first guy. And that's what happened.
He used to go through, which was a radio station, KFWB, at the time, and Ted Quillen was a DJ there, and everywhere you could hear him in the radio. In other words, in Spanish, they call him ese vato, means hey guy, you know. He would talk to him over the radio when we were going, like maybe we were taking the Pacific Ocean Park to all of these places.
Coca-Cola did one of those, call in and identify the singer, and he'll come and play for you, and Coca-Cola furnished the pizza and the Coke. Yeah. So we used to go with him, Mary.
One of the contests they had on KFWB was if you named the star who was playing on the radio, you would get a pizza party, okay? So he was always going to those pizza places, and he told me, I am tired of this. I said, what do you want? You want to be a musician, a star with your music or not? I said, if not, just don't go to the party no more, because that was exposure for him, you know?
They were very close because at that time Connie didn't have, well, she had a car, but it wasn't, you know, wasn't that good for her to be traveling right to Santa Monica or El Monte or all those places he used to play. So Lelo and Ernestine had new cars, so he used to ask them to take him to all his, you know, gigs and everything, and they would.
Because when he first started his career, my husband had to lend him clothes. My husband had to give him a haircut. My husband was all there for him, you know, but they were so poor, you know, he couldn't afford too many things when he first got started.
They would never say no. They would always took him wherever they could.
The first hit was Come On, Let's Go. And then he put out Donna and La Bamba double-sided. And that hit big. That hit big. All we could see was the numbers going up, going up, going up.
He came to me with the song Donna. He called me on the phone and says, I wrote a song for my girl Donna. I got a girl, Donna is her name, and that's all he had.
I had a girl, Donna was her name.
He came home that night because he was staying with us. He lived with us. And it came out and he sang it to Donna over the telephone. He sang the song and he says, no, you're not doing this for me. And he says, yes, I am. He says, she cried and cried and cried. I even had to get the phone and tell her, yes, it is for you.
And I had him put down a take on it once we finished the song, just the guitar and his voice. And it turned out so good because he didn't, you know, he was just doing what he felt at the moment. There was no pressure or anything, just a little couple of microphones sitting there in my little room, which was as big as this room, it was half the size of this room. And so I took it over and overdubbed it. So I took Donna on an acetate, and on the back of it I put the one that I thought was going to be the single, because Donna was a ballad, a very slow ballad coming off of Come On, Let's Go. I don't know, I didn't know whether that would work or not, because his audience knew him as a kind of the Latin rocker. And so I took it up to KFWB, and the rest is history. Like I say, they started playing it. They wanted to go on Donna. So I'm not going to argue with those disc jockeys. And that took off like a rocket. So I had the acetate with me. I had a couple of cut, and then I decided Donna, Come On, Let's Go was number 46 in the nation at that time. So I could see that that was about the peak. I felt that way. So I said, let's do the tour now, because we can get the jockeys behind us. And as I went through there, I would play Donna to the jockeys and also to my distributors. So when I got home after about 3 weeks, there were 150,000 back orders on that record. In those days, that was incredible.
I had a girl, Donna was her name. Since she left me, I never been the same, 'cause I love my girl, Donna was her name.
Probably the most easygoing love ballad for kids to go off in the corner and snuggle up. His intensity on that, of course, was emotional also, because the young lady's name was Donna, and he dedicated that to a lady he liked very, very much.
I've not met Donna, but I've read a lot about her.
That was kind of like, you know, that was like a real weird situation that never would have happened, number one, because he was from one side of the tracks and she was from the other, and but they all went to school together, of course.
And every time I meet somebody named Donna, I'm inclined to sing a few bars and find out what happens.
The other ones that were having a bet, and I still remember them, were the Cress. They were singing 16 Candles, so he would call them from the house, or they would call him, because they were pretty well together. And he says, well, okay, I'm gonna bet you $100 that Donna is gonna go up above you 16 Candles. And sure enough, it went over.
Donna was a typical teenage ballad then, and La Bamba had all that fire and drive and energy, you know. It's a great double-sided record, it really was.
Donna went to #1, and shortly after that, they sold, just a few days later, they sold like a million copies of La Bamba. So it flipped over for him. He had 2 hits on 1 record, which is pretty big news.
My dad used to have barbecues and get-togethers over there, and my cousins used to come by, and there was 3 of them that were musicians. 2 of them played guitar, and the other one played the stand-up bass fiddle. And that's where he got the idea of La Bamba. My cousin used to play La Bamba all the time. His name was Dickie Cota, and he's the one that taught Ritchie how to play La Bamba.
Well, we were going up to San Francisco on his first television appearance, and as fate would have it, Sam Cooke was on that show. I have the particulars in my book, but at any rate, the story is, and I had this new Thunderbird, and my wife was in the front seat with my little 9-month-old baby, my first son, and Ritchie was in the back seat with his guitar. And he was strumming all the way up to San Francisco, like, what, 8-7 hours. And then at one point, I heard this da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. He was playing it like that. When he was playing da-da-da-da-da-da-da, so like almost a swing thing, you know? And I said, boy, that sounds like that could be a pretty hot record. We ought to develop that for He said, no, I don't want to do that, because he said, that's from my country, and I don't want to commercialize my country.
Bob King wanted him to do the song, but he said, I can't, because it's already been a Mexican, what they call it, but I told him, Ritchie, anybody can make that song, because it's, I forget what they call it. But he says, well, okay, but you're going to have to translate that song for me. I said, whatever you want to, I'll do it. So we did, and it, like I said, it went out of whack.
La Bamba, to me, was the piece de resistance for him. He didn't, the way I understand it, Ritchie first of all, didn't speak Spanish, at least in front of me, ever. That was a complete departure from anything else that had ever been done in rock and roll. But it was rock and roll.
In my recollection, I may be wrong, but I think it's the only tune in my early career, at least in the late 50s and early 60s, that was all foreign language that hit the top 10. Everybody did jump at it. They didn't care particularly about the message there. In that point, Ritchie was smart because it was a rhythm that sold that. It was a marvelous rhythm that not only could the Chicanos dance to, Hispanics, but everybody picked up on it real well. And it was a beautiful piece of music that could just cross all of those ethnic spectra without any trouble whatsoever. Again, I think it was a tribute to the young man's genius.
It really can't say he went to his head, because he was Ritchie. Ritchie was Ritchie.
I thought Ritchie was this kind of a person. He could walk into any place, strange place, and you'd have the feeling like if he knew you for, forever, that he's known you for not that sort of an ambassador. He could make friends easy, and he could walk in a room and there'd be 10 people, and he'd say, hello to each one of them in a different way.
Yet I think, knowing that they were in poverty before, he didn't show, that he was a rich kid or anything like that, no.
And but the one thing about it was outstanding about him, he came from a very rough area, the ghetto out there. Kids were getting shot on the school grounds. If they were a junior or on the senior lawn, you were dead. And so they had a lot of problems. The cops always rode double, and black and white didn't mix in those days out there. And but he wasn't a part of that. He was well respected by I had a car club, which was like a real raunchy group of guys, and they really respected Ritchie because he was kind of a tough guy. Nobody would challenge him, but he wasn't the kind. He wasn't gregarious. He wouldn't be in with the gang or anything like that, because music was his thing, and his guitar, and that was it. Didn't smoke, didn't chew, didn't go with the guys that do.
Like I said before, it was Ritchie, and then all of a sudden it was Ritchie the singer.
He just seemed so happy. he just seemed, it was like he was always smiling. It was almost like he was with you, but he wasn't there. He was still kind of coming off of that high of the performance the night before, or looking forward to the next one. So even when he was there, it was like he wasn't.
I knew he had a bag or a suitcase or whatever, but I would always go into it because I liked the makeup. And you know, he had the makeup that you put on when he would perform, and he sometimes go and find me around, you know, somewhere, and I have it all over. He says, you know, you're not supposed to do that. This costs a lot of money, you know. And I would say, yeah, but you always wear it, you know.
And everybody would call him. Everybody would just look up to him, like, and he was only 16 years old. They looked up to him like a big, you know, like he was big. Well, which he was, you know, at the time. For being such a young kid, he came up real fast.
I seen Richie change from one day to the next, from a kid to an adult, you know, when that happened. I mean,
He had become like a Roman candle. It just had gone off, and he was in the heavens so fast at such an early age.
Like really rushed into it, let's put it that way.
The only time I remember him really being there was like when he was eating. He would say things like, man, it sure is good to be home. You know, I've missed your cooking, Mom.
All the time he kept writing to her mom, when I come back, I'm going to bring enough money to buy you a car. Because they were always having problems with cars. And then he says, I'm going to buy you a house. And he did. He bought her a house. Bob King gave him some money, bought her a house. He bought it with our name on the house. We bought the house for him. In other words, put it in our name because he wanted to surprise her. So she didn't know nothing about, you know, the house. And so when he presented, you know, her with a house, she just no tears could finish the way she cried.
We were living on Gain Street. Me and Bobby stayed on Gain Street. And then that's when he bought the house for Connie on Remington, which is just a couple of blocks down the road. And me and Bobby were living there with Brenda and Robert. And he used to go out of his way to visit me and play with Brenda and Robert. That was his first niece and nephew.
Plus, I think I envied him. You know. And it was, then after the record did go down, I mean, you know, I looked up, but it's harder to look up to your younger brother. Maybe he was older than me, it would have been easier for me, you know. But I was, yeah, I was proud of him. Although I never told him so.
He did a song called You're Mine, We Belong Together, that was just, the girls couldn't stand up. They just, oh, you know.
We Belong Together was a song that he, mostly, I can remember he liked to sing.
You know, that's kind of our family anthem. We belong together.
You're mine, and we belong together. Yes, we belong together for eternity. You're mine, mine.
Stay Beside Me. Yeah, that I was crying when I heard that. I think a lot of people do. And again, Ritchie picked a message from the heart.
Oh my goodness, Stay Beside Me. Always. That even chokes me up just to even, hear the words about Stay Beside Me.
Today, a high school senior could go out on a date with his high school senior girlfriend and play that tune on his car radio off a CD and she'd get the message. I really think so.
Today, there's two ways to get a record going. If you got $1 million, you can buy your way into radio. If you don't, all you can do is tour, face to face, and build a fan base that way. So the next time a record comes out, they remember seeing him on stage and he was wonderful, and so they'll buy this record. That's the other way. And that's exactly what I did. I took him out there and showed his face all over the place. We played gigs for every jockey in every town that we went into. We'd go in, and that night we'd go out and play a dance for him where he would appear and sing.
He kept going to all West Covina, Azusa, El Monte Legion Stadium, till he finally got places to go out of town. He went to Hawaii, he went back east on the tour.
I just remember him being gone a lot.
Took him up into Canada. And I remember we were in a log cabin or something. The kids were going nuts about this guy standing up there just playing his guitar. We did the Alan Freed show over back there. We did the Dick Clark show over back there, which was very lucky.
When Ritchie came on American Bandstand, we had that little TV just the way it showed. My sister and I were sitting at Mama's feet as we watched him on TV. And we were like, that's Ritchie, that's really Ritchie, he's on TV.
As soon as we got there, there was all this kids come running out of the garage. I was supposed to be there to help him carry his instruments. I didn't have to carry anything. I mean, they all came out and they carried everything for him.
When we traveled, we lived together, ate together, slept in the same room. Everything was like, he was like my son, really, because I was 35 years old at that point, and 36 or something like that, and he was just a kid. He didn't have a father, and he used to ask me a lot of questions about life and about his feelings and stuff.
I don't know, my mom, she kept a lot of things to herself. But I mean, she was happy for him and everything, but she didn't like the traveling, and the flying he had to do. Okay? For some reason, she had this fear about airplanes,
She used to worry a lot. I know that. She was always worried about him. Is he okay? Is he going to be okay when he's coming home?
We traveled by plane. We would go from, it was just a hop over the lake from like Chicago to Cleveland and stuff like that. Just short hops. But the plane fares in those days, well, everything was relative, I suppose. But yeah, we didn't travel by bus at all.
We lived by the airport right there in Pacoima, Whiteman Airport. And we would always come like maybe 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock from all his other performances. And he would say, I'll never ride those SOBs. When they ordered him the suit, Bob Keane, I guess, ordered the suit at Nudi's, which is a big Western country store out here in the valley. And I don't know if it's still there or not. But he was so proud of that night. Oh my goodness. You can see it in the video. When you show it, it'll come out where you see just the happiness in him.
This was the parties that they had there. That was a baptism for Mario. Like, well, baptisms were a big thing in the Latino culture. I mean, you need an excuse to party. You have a baptism and get down.
And boy, that house was packed. It was packed. And then I don't know what they were playing on it was the radio, I think. And you could see me and Richie's cousin dancing, and me and Richie together standing right there on the doorway.
I seen him the day that they took him down to the airport. I usually went with him and Ernestine and Lelo. And that day, for some reason, I didn't go.
Well, we were the ones that took him to the airport every time we would fly out. Every time. We'd be there to take him, we'd be there to pick him up. So last time was right before he died.
I seen him off from the house, right there in the house he had bought for my mom in Remington Street, Dakota. That was the last time I seen him. And plus we had a little misunderstanding a couple of days before that, and there were still bad vibes as far as I'm concerned, you know, when he left.
The first really big break for me came when I was offered the opportunity to play with Buddy. Tommy also had been working with the Crickets for the last probably 8 months before. And so, and Tommy wasn't about to stay in Lubbock. He knew that Buddy was the key to, you know, to success as far as the music business was concerned for rock. And he was glad. Buddy gave him the job of getting Waylon and me both into the group and making a new group. They called us the Crickets. We went to New York just after just after Christmas, the 1st of January. Flew up there. We went to first. My mom drove us to Lubbock, Tommy and I, to Lubbock, and we picked up Waylon, and then we flew to New York. So we had a few days to live there in New York with Buddy at the apartment before, and rehearse and get all our material together before we left to go to Chicago.
Those tours in those days, the guys aren't making that much money, and it was rough, you know, but they were making more than they'd ever made before in their life, and they're out there as stars, you know. It was a big rush for them.
We backed up Ritchie and the Big Bopper and Dion, Frankie Sardo. They brought in a female singer, a female Elvis. I can't remember the girl's name right now, but she was good, and she played a few dates with us.
The tour was set up in the East, of course, and I think Ritchie was one of the only guys that came from the West Coast.
GAC was General Artists Corporation, Irving Fells.
Every so often at the Surf, we'd have a show come through, usually sponsored by General Artists Corporation, out of New York, which at that time was putting together pop music stars, some rock and roll, some not.
At any rate, he was the biggest booking agency in the country at that time. And they had put this winter dance party together, really without a whole lot of thought about what was going to happen to us in the middle of it. Bad weather and the itinerary was terrible. I mean, we could have played the same places on different dates and not gotten into so much trouble with the buses because of the bad weather. But we'd go halfway across the state and then halfway back across the state instead of going, you know, what would logically have been a better way to go. First year was in Milwaukee, and we were late, very late. As a matter of fact, I remember Buddy when the bus pulled up, I guess it was pretty close to 9:30, and we were supposed to be there on stage performing by 8 o'clock. Buddy's first comment was, I wonder what time this 8 o'clock gig's gonna start. We had to set up in front of the crowd. They didn't have curtains across the stage, and they were angry because they wanted us there an hour and a half earlier. So Milwaukee was the first place that we played.
If you were within 200 miles of Chicago on a Saturday and you were trying to break a new artist, you would call Jim Lonsberry and do his show, because he could do for you what nobody could do.
Jim, in a way, was kind of my mentor, because a job I had at WGN Television as a floor director, when I had a break, I'd go down to radio and sit there and watch Jim Lounsbury work and said, gee, I want to be like you. And by golly, I was like him, and coincidentally, we both emceed the winter dance party, and something that I think neither Jim nor I will forget.
I bought the show, produced it, emceed it with Buddy Holly, the Big Bopper, Ritchie Valens, Dion and the Belmonts, Debbie Stevens and Frankie Sardo. And we played that, put that in the Eagles Ballroom in Kenosha, Wisconsin on January 24th, 1959.
He had a following. Jim was the most likable guy in the world. Kids loved him. Excuse me, and he believed in what he was doing. Jim was not a phony. He told the kids exactly what he felt or what he didn't feel.
The only promotion done on the tour was the radio advertising, and then they put up the posters all over town. We would go on occasion to a radio or a TV show and talk and you know, promote the program.
Oh, Donna, oh, Donna, oh, Donna, oh, Donna.
Hi everybody, this is Ritchie Valens. I will be on the Winter Dance Party coming your way very shortly. I will be having a ball singing for you, and I hope to see you all real soon.
Whatever acts came in town, they would bring their records to me, or the record company would, and Jim would tell me what show, what artists were going to be on the show, and I would play the records when he asked for it.
Buddy wasn't there because I guess he was really off fatigued like the rest of the guys. But the Big Bopper and Ritchie Valens showed up to be guests on my Saturday TV show at Channel 7 in Chicago.
We had some coffee at the studio with Ritchie. He was a little nervous because this was his first big swing through the country on this tour, and he was hotter than anybody.
A nice young kid, again, I say that not disparagingly, but he was about 18, 19 years old, I guess was all he was. Just a nice young kid with a tremendous hit record, two-sided hit record, big one, you know.
He was working before he was rehearsing in the back, playing guitar just by himself, and he was an incredible guitar player. A lot of people do not even know that he played incredible guitar. If you didn't hear him play while he was rehearsing or just goofing around, you never knew he played that well. Because when they sing, they play the chords for what they're singing.
And they lip-synced their records and talked to the kids and signed autographs and took off.
Ritchie was a little laid back because it was all new to him. And understand, the Big Bopper was a disc jockey. And so he knew that. And he got lucky with this record. And Ritchie Valens, the last hop, I think that they did, I'm talking about TV now, was Jim Lansbury's show.
I had another record hop that evening, I did first. But I made arrangements to leave that one early on the south side. And to get to Kenosha, Wisconsin, I would never get there in time driving a car. So I chartered a small airplane at Midway Airport and flew to Kenosha, to the airport up there. Then went in and emceed the last half of the Winter Dance Party at Kenosha.
We played to packed houses even in snowstorms. There was one place when we pulled up to it, and I can't remember where it was now, I wish I could, but it was like driving across 100 yards of nothing but snow through the parking lot to get to a building that looked like nobody would ever get out in that kind of weather and come to this place. By the time we unloaded and then set up on stage, by the time we walked out on stage, it was packed, absolutely packed.
It was a big crowd, cold, snowy night, snow on the ground, freezing. I had this guy come over and take pictures for me. I don't know why, I'd never done that before. I just had, somebody told me I should get some real professional pictures on this. A lot of those have shown up. And Buddy was doing his hits, and the Big Bopper was clowning around. But Ritchie Valens, and he's a guy who hasn't gotten the attention till now, at least, that the Big Bopper and Buddy Holly have. Ritchie, he not only had a couple hit records as a singer, but he played a tremendous guitar. He was a great guitar player. I know the guys in the band would just sort of shake their head like, wow, this guy really plays.
When Ritchie walked out on stage, it wasn't just fun anymore. It was electrical. It was like you stuck your finger into a light socket. Like the crowd was electrified that way.
There'd be the crowd down front, maybe 20 deep, watching the performances. Other people would be dancing all around the ballroom.
Most of the places we played didn't have chairs. No place to sit. So the people either stood right in front of the stage and watched what was going on, or they were back of that group dancing. And that's the vast majority. You couldn't sit in a chair and watch Ritchie play anyway. He'd bring you to your feet. The music was so powerful that he would bring you to your feet. You couldn't sit there. But the kids wanted to dance. And some would crowd the stage and scream and holler, and some would be back behind them dancing. Most of the people were back behind them dancing, having a good time dancing. The crowds were, I think, quite the same as far as you know, being a fan would be concerned. They screamed for their heroes and get all torn up. The girls would cry. It was fun to watch. It really was. But at the same time, after the show, we would all be out meeting the people and signing autographs.
And that was a good tour because they were doing business because they had, Dion of Belmont had some pretty good records out already. And of course, a big bopper, Chantilly Lace, was dynamite. And of course, Buddy Holly had some big hits, That'll Be a Day and Maybe Baby and stuff like that. So, and with Ritchie, they had a lot of hit records going in that group. A lot of hit records.
And the sales in town were excellent. We watched Billboard and we watched several other charts, and we also totaled up the record sales in town. And so we could see that Ritchie Valens' music was coming up on our top 40 list almost daily. We knew that we had 4 big hits on our hand with Dion and Buddy and Ritchie and the Big Bopper.
It was a great experience for Ritchie because they all supported him a lot, you know, and his record was hot. He was like #2 in the nation, and he was the star of the show, actually. He was new. The reason he was the star is because he was new.
Ritchie was just 17 years old, and I was young. I was only 19. I was not as mature as Ritchie, and that was one of the things that amazed me about him. He was, you know, he acted like a grown-up man instead of a 17-year-old kid. He didn't have a whole lot to say until he walked on stage. But when he walked on stage, he was in command. Just like a field general. He knew what to do. He knew what button to push to make the girls scream. It was incredible to watch him. And more fun than that to play with him. As far as rehearsal was concerned, it didn't take a lot of rehearsal with Ritchie. Ritchie played rock and roll. And if you played rock and roll, we had good players. And Tommy Allsup and Waylon are not, you know, not too shabby. If you're working with good players, it's not hard to play rock and roll. It's fun to play rock and roll. The beat is always just about the same, depends on what you're playing. But all you have to do is grab hold of Ritchie's coattails and hang on. That was my first time out with the big names like that. I guess Ritchie had been exposed. He'd already made a little movie and had been exposed to it even more than me at that point. But he kind of buddied up to me to keep me out of trouble and to be a friend. I felt like he was there for me and I'd get to be there for him. We spent a good bit of time talking. We talked about what it felt like for him on stage, and that's why I believe that it was such a metamorphosis from riding in the bus to being on the stage. Or after the gig, Ritchie would go to his room. He didn't party and hang out and carry on with everybody. That you know, he was totally different than I expected a rock and roll star to be. I thought a rock and roll star would have all these girls hanging around him, and Ritchie didn't want all the girls. He would go to his room and he'd write music, and he'd play and practice. He was probably the most focused young man I believe I ever met. Ritchie was a little homesick too, but more physically sick than homesick. He was still excited about turning the people on. Yeah, that was his love of his life, was to walk on that stage and flip that, you know, flip the switch on that guitar and watch him go nuts.
I think he called me on a Monday or Tuesday and asked for my mom, and I answered the phone. I was home watching my daughter, and he called and he said, "Is Mom home?" I said, "No," and he said, told me he was tired and he feeling homesick, wanted Mom to go down there and see if, you know, and finish the tour with him or her. So Mom said she wouldn't go, and she said, "Why don't you come?" And he told me, you know. And to me it was a surprise. I asked, "Do you really want me to go?" He said, "Yeah." And matter of fact, he said something like, "I was on a Tuesday," and he said like, Thursday I was supposed to leave on a Friday, I think, and meet him on a Saturday.
Homesickness was talked about on several occasions. It'd be nice if he had his brother with him. It'd be nice if you know, He wasn't so far away from home. It'd be nice if the bus had a heater. Extremely cold weather, the buses would go maybe 1 or 2 days without having some kind of a major problem. The biggest major problem was the heaters wouldn't work on the buses, and you can't imagine how cold you can get on one of those buses. We're talking about just a plain bus with seats on it, no place to lay down, actually no place to hang clothes. Had to make places to do that. So it was very uncomfortable, it was very cold. And after a few days, the guys began to get sick. They were obviously sick, and sick and tired of having to ride around in the cold that way. There was Tommy and Waylon and Buddy and me, so there were 4 of us. There was Dion and his 3. There was Richie, and there was the Big Bopper, and we had Sam, who was our manager, road manager, and we had our bus driver. And then, you know, on occasion we would have other people, like the female Elvis performer that we had. Boy, I wish I could remember her name. She was good.
The guys were plagued by fatigue and colds, and the bus, they had raunchy old worn-out buses to begin with, I gather, and they were traveling all that North Country in the middle of the wintertime. You can imagine how cold that is up in Minnesota, Wisconsin, North Dakota, all that area.
The most negative experiences were the weather and the conditions on the bus, because again, Richie ended up with the flu, and so did the Big Bopper. For the other guys, they were headliners. As far as I was concerned, I was just a side man. But the other guys, you know, Richie and Dion and Buddy and the Big Boppers, the headliners, the only difficulties they had were feeling bad about the transportation that was furnished to them. Sam went ahead of us and made sure that our hotel arrangements were okay and that everything was taken care of like that. But having to ride in that kind of transportation when you're a big name artist like that, it's got to make you feel like somebody's ripping you off.
I talked to him the night before he was killed. I was down at Jack's at the beach on the pier down here in Manhattan, or Venice. And I called him on the payphone, and he was telling me about the terrible conditions and everything. And I said, well, forget it. Come home. Just get on, you know, a plane or something. Let me know if you need some money or whatever. And he had my overcoat, actually, because he didn't have one. I gave him my black camel's hair coat, my favorite coat, and very heavy, fortunately for him. And so he said, okay. And I expected to hear from him the next day, you know, but obviously he decided to stay.
And that was the last place that I played with him, was Duluth. We left, and en route to the next place, the bus just broke down out in the middle of nowhere. When they took me off the bus, I was in really bad shape. My feet had frozen, or not frozen, but they were frostbitten. My toes, I couldn't move them at all, and I was in an awful lot of pain. I was hollering, raising a lot of sand, so they took me straight to the hospital. I don't remember anything for the first, like, 24 hours. I think they sedated me.
The night that Richie and Buddy and Dion and Bopper came in was the biggest crowd we've ever had up to that point at the Surf Ballroom for any show, whether it happened to be their weekend big dances or their polka nights or the pop shows. This was the biggest crowd they'd ever had. In fact, and the show cost a lot. You know, if we bring in Bobby Darin, it would cost X amount of dollars, but to bring in 4X cost us an awful lot of money. So instead of charging the kids 75 cents, we charged them $1.25.
He didn't want to disappoint his fans because they'd sold out, apparently. And they weren't really even going to show up there. Everybody was really upset, but they did.
The show with all of these stars was divided into 2 parts, and the first half of the show was Frankie Sardo, and then we had the Big Bopper. And then we had Ritchie Valens closed out the first act. The second half was Dion and the Belmonts, and then Dion introduced Buddy Holly because that night the drummer for Dion and the Belmonts, Charlie Bunch, was in the hospital with frostbite from that lousy bus they were traveling on. So Buddy played the drums. Only we didn't tell anybody it was Buddy playing the drums. And then when Dion introduced his sideman, he introduced finally his drummer, he said, oh yeah, it's a young kid we picked up here on the road by the name of Charles, well, we call him Buddy Holly. And with that, Buddy got up and performed, which was a great way to end Act Two. But Act One ended with Ritchie Valens. Now, before we went on, I think you should know this. I found Ritchie Valens to be an incredibly quiet, shy young man. It took 3 or 4 suggestions on my part to stop calling me Mr. Hale. Well, we're in this together, you may call me Bob. And I started calling him Mr. Valens, and then he caught it and loosened up a little bit. He was nervous, but he was just basically a shy gentleman. So that when I introduced Ritchie, I wasn't sure how he was going to perform, because all I saw was a quiet guy practicing his chords, smiling a little, and obviously nervous, hands moving over the instrument. When Ritchie came out on the stage following the Big Bopper, you just feel the press got a little closer, because the kids, we had no barrier. We just let the kids come up and they're touching our shoes, and no problems of crushing anybody or anybody getting out of hand. But when Ritchie came out there, the squeal was what I noticed first. Not just the audience, the girls went crazy. When he came out there, he owned that audience, and he was a consummate professional, because he was greeted well. That audience just took to him and almost embraced him. I think with his music, I think Ritchie embraced that audience back.
I had a girl, Donna was her name. Since she left me, I never been the same, 'cause I love myself. Donna, where can you be?
When we were at the break point of the show between Acts 1 and 2. Buddy had placed a call at Carol Anderson's suggestion to rent the airplane from Dwyer Flying Services out at the airport. And at that point, it was Buddy Holly, Waylon Jennings, who was a backup man, and then Tommy Alsop, who had the seats. So Big Bopper talked Waylon Jennings out of his seat because Bopper had a fever. He was perspiring something terrible, wanted to get his clothes washed. They all had stinking clothes in that bus, and he wanted to get some rest. So he talked Waylon out of his seat. And then Ritchie decided that he wanted to go, so he got a hold of Tommy Alsop and was really badgering him at halftime. Let me have your seat, Tommy. No, I want to fly. Let me have your seat, to the point where Tommy said, all right, let's flip a coin. And neither one of them had a coin in their stage clothes, and I did, and I grabbed the coin, and I said, okay, Ritchie, you want to go, you call it. And Ritchie said heads, and heads it was. So when they got in the car, all I said was, hey, you guys, I'll see you in a few months, and we'll have the bratwurst ready. And they said goodbye, Bob, goodbye, Kathy, my wife was there, and we waved goodbye, and Carol Anderson said, I'll talk to you tomorrow, Bob. When they left in Carol Anderson's car, the stars were shining. We could see the stars out that night. And they went to the airport. 45 minutes later, when Kathy and I left the surf ballroom and we were driving along the Lakeshore Drive, the wind was blowing that snow so hard that it was coming almost horizontal across the road. And I remember saying this to Kathy as we left the surf ballroom, I hope those guys took off before the storm came in. And it came in like a door slamming.
Were identified as 22-year-old Buddy Holly, 21-year-old Ritchie Valens, and J.P. Richardson, known professionally as the Big Bopper. The 4-place plane was chartered from a flying service of Mason City. The pilot was Roger Peterson. The 3 singers had appeared at the Surf Ballroom in Clear Lake last night and were on their way to Fargo, North Dakota for an appearance there tonight. A strong southerly wind and light blowing snow filled the air when the plane took off. The Beechcraft Bonanza burned when it crashed into a field on a farm 15 miles northwest of Mason
Richardson,
City,
known as the Big Bopper. The crash occurred in a light snow northwest of Mason City and also killed the pilot of the plane. Richie Valens' latest recording, Donna, is #1 on the CHUM hit parade. Further details of the crash have
and there are many. You'll realize this is a very big day in the lives of many in our generation, because this is a day that ended in tragedy for 3 of the biggest names in the music business. The names in order of bigness probably would be Ritchie Valens, Buddy Holly of the Crickets, and also the Big Bopper. This is a story that we put together.
Then the next day, after that, I got a phone call the nurse came and brought me a wheelchair because the phone was down the hall, payphone down the hall. And it was my mother. And she wanted to know what I was going to do now, and I had no idea what she was talking about.
My wife, who had a record out at that time, and Paul Gallus, a Chicago record promoter, one of the best in the world, we were all driving out to suburban Chicago to visit a couple of radio stations, one in St. Charles, Illinois. This 9:30, 10 o'clock in the morning. And we had the radio on, and here came this bulletin. We couldn't believe it, just out of nowhere, that they'd been found dead, their plane had crashed, just like that.
Shortly after 9 o'clock, we had a bulletin that came across the UPI that somebody had heard on a police radio that there had been a plane crash in Iowa, in Mason City, outside the airport. And I didn't put the two together. Maybe I was too tired, maybe it would have been the last thought of my mind that it would have been their plane. And Carol Anderson called me, he said, "Bob, I just come from the airport the coroner called me out to identify the bodies." And I said, "What are you talking about?" He said, "Bob, Buddy Holly, Ritchie Valens, and the Big Bopper were killed in a plane crash."
I was right in front of, on Sunset Boulevard, just turning to go up to my office. And I had the radio on, and WBN said, "And now the late, great Ritchie Valens." And I thought, what are you talking about?
It was as if a disembodied voice was talking to a disembodied person. I'm looking around to see what is this thing I'm hearing. And I could just, even now, the heat comes in the back of the ears and your hair stands up, and that sick feeling in the pit of your stomach.
Ow, my stomach, it was just, just all the blood left my stomach. It was a terrible shock.
It was just shattering. That's dumbfounded to hear that. And this kid was a kid, prime of his life.
I couldn't believe it. I mean, when she told me that, I said, she didn't know I was Richie's brother, and she said, "It's Connie home?" My mom and I came out from underneath the car, and I said, "No, but she's down at the other house, just a couple of blocks down." I said, And she said, "Well, I just wanted to tell her that I heard in the news about an airplane crashing Ritchie Valens." This and I said, "No, wait a minute." So I got out of the car, and I don't know, still I wasn't sure. I only had what she told me, And so I started my car and backed out of the driveway, went down about a block, made a right-hand turn, and it died on me, and I just jumped out of the car. And it was about a block from there, and I ran the rest of the way. Opened the door of the house and walked in, and there was Joel and Freddie Augusta, friends of Richie, walking down the hallway. Was holding my mom. They were each other, one on each side of my mom's. My mom looked at me and she said, "We just lost your brother." And I seen my mother age about 20 years.
I was working at the time in Van Nuys in a ceramic plant. I had been working there for, well, not even a year. And they called me. They called me to the office. I didn't know why, because the secretary, her name was Goldie. I remember her so well. And she went back out there. I wasn't she'd been in receiving then, and then she said, "Rosie, what? Oh, can we see you at the office?" Then I go, "Oh heck, I did something wrong or something, So I went to the office, and we were just talking, going down the factory to the office, and Bobby was there. And he's the one that told me. And I just couldn't believe it. I asked him how, when, what, and he says, "I don't know." He goes, "I don't know, but let's go home here. Let's go home. And I guess we didn't talk very much because at that time he was, he had stopped drinking at that time.
Well, I was working in Burbank. My husband was working in Glendale, and they called my job, and he says, "Hon," he says, "I'm gonna go pick you up." I said, "What happened?" He says, "Something happened at the house. They won't tell me what it is with Connie." And I says, "Okay." I said, "Pick me up." So I waited for him to pick me up. We came down straight San Fernando Road from Burbank, and as we were going down San Fernando Road, we had the KFWB that we kept it there because they were always playing Ritchie songs. And when we were almost in front of the hospital, some hospital there in Sun Valley, it says 3 top rock and roll singers have been killed. And first name that came up was Ritchie Valens. I'm telling you, I went hysterical. Hysterical because, like I said, I couldn't hold myself from crying and screaming. And my husband's, I felt the car go like this. My husband was driving. It jerked back and forth. And I said, "Hon, are you okay?" Because as bad as I was crying, I knew he felt the same as I did, but he was driving. So we got home, and oh my goodness, it was reporters, people, all kinds of people there at the house.
I remember walking home, and some little girl coming up to me on the corner and saying, "You're Richie Valens' sister, aren't you?" And I looked at her and I said, "Yes." And then she looks at me and she goes, "Well, he's dead." And I looked at her and I go, "You're crazy, you're lying. You're just jealous." She goes, "No, really, he's dead. We heard it on the radio." And I just remember looking at her and going, "You're lying." And then just turning away from her and, you know, thinking, what is she talking about? And I remember as I opened the front door, I saw Mama sitting in a chair, almost like in the middle of the room, and that was really strange, and all these people were around her. And she just looked so sad. And I just look at her and I say, "Mom." And she looked at me and she just put her head down. And I just remember running to her and just, you know, falling on my knees and just saying, "Mom, Richie, Mom." And she just, you know, patted my head.
Kids came out. Kids skipped school. They wanted to be somewhere. I can remember the kids came out with parents, and parents who had been there the night before. We always invited the parents to come in free, and there were a lot of parents to catch the show. They came out with their kids, and we just sat around and we cried, and then the Pepsi people and the Coca-Cola people, God bless them, they all came out with extra cases. We called them and said, "We got a bunch of kids here. Can you give us some bottles so we can hand them out?" Kids wanted to be somewhere. Some of them just went and drove around the crash site, and some went around, drove around the surf. A lot of came out to the radio station where we were playing the music, and so my boss said, "Why don't we do some interviews with the kids if they want to?" And so we had a live mic in there, and I put some of the young people on to get their reaction, and it was difficult. We had a lot of tears going, and a couple of those kids were standing there with the autographs of the pictures of the 3 guys, and saying, you know, the same thing I said. "I can't believe that a few hours ago, less than 12 hours ago, I was getting their autograph, and now they're dead." It was the biggest shock, I would say, the biggest shock of my career.
Went to work for the Globe Gazette in 1946 as a news photographer and stayed with them for 35.5 years. I understand that the airport flying service, Dwyer Flying Service, that early that morning, they didn't radio back from Fargo, I believe it was, where they were supposed to radio when they got there. And since they didn't come back, he was checking out. He got in a plane, according to this is what I heard afterward, that he took off, barely daylight, and saw the crash down in the field. The assignment broke at about, I think, 8 o'clock, about the time I came to work, the morning of the crash. And all I had to go on was there was an airplane crash and where to get to it. When it reached the newsroom at the Globe, we didn't know at the time that it was this plane from the night before. And when I got out to the field, I drove out alone to the field and saw from a distance we could see the crash site, but they had to wait, the sheriffs had to wait till the county coroner showed up before we could drive down to the crash site. And it was at that time, while I was listening to my car radio, that I first heard that it was the plane crash of the Buddy Holly group. Up to that point, I didn't know that it was their plane, or who was in the plane. And he finally showed up. He was a Dr. Smiley. And while he delayed us a while, we all went down together, down and around the field to get to the site, along with about 3 or 4 other cars. I think there was people there from the mortuary at Clear Lake that were alerted, of course, and the sheriffs. There were several sheriffs there, and myself, and 1 or 2 highway patrolmen showed up. It was very stark and no sun, and of course it's daylight by then. But it was in a slightly stubble field, and there had been a very, very light snow after the accident. So there was a little snow involved on the wing of the crashed plane, and the bodies, of course, had a little snow on them. It was more like a scene with no movement is one way to describe it. It was, the plane crashed up after hitting the ground about here, started digging, and then it started rolling across and losing bits of the plane and rolled clear up to the fence up here. The plane had been literally catapulting, running up into a ball after it struck the ground, and it rolled up to this fence, and the bodies were thrown out on the ground. The pilot was inside the plane. You couldn't see him at all. He was wrapped up in the plane. The big bopper was across the fence. Holly and Valens were right close together in the foreground of the pictures, with the plane in the background. They were covered up by their jackets, their coats. Luckily, for the sake of not having morbid pictures, they actually were, the 2, Valens and Holly, were face down. I say lucky because we didn't have to do any covering up to take pictures of it. Of course, they were all killed instantly in the crash. Nobody lived to the end of the crash. The coroner was making notes on the pad that he had with him. He was looking over the luggage and some of the debris. As far as talking, they were very quiet. It wasn't very little interplay between people there. I just moved around and took pictures of whatever I thought would be a news photo. We had basically eight pictures, 8 different pictures. I think I actually used 10 pieces of film on the old 4x5 speed graphic and covered the whole accident that way. After taking pictures, I had to get back to the Globe and develop my film because we had pressure on us for pictures from all over. And I told the reporter that showed up out there, that rode back with me, I said, I have to get back. We were an afternoon paper then. He didn't think it was that big a deal. I told him, well, I'm going to have all kinds of phone calls when I get back. And I did. And then the next day I went back out to the site, and the CAA men, now FAA, CAA men were taking the plane apart bit by bit to check the controls, the condition of the controls when the plane crashed. trying to arrive at their opinion of what happened.
Everybody wanted to know why. We figured it was because they tried to fly into a blizzard and the airplane just went down.
There have been a lot of wild theories written about that crash, but as a commercial instrument rated pilot, I can tell you it was probably, I think it was pilot error. The guy had taken instrument flight training but had not passed his instrument flight test. And I read the accident report too from the NTSB and the FAA, and apparently it just flew into some scattered snow showers shortly after takeoff, and he lost the horizon and he couldn't hold it straight and level, and then they lost it and they just went on in and they crashed.
That it's like flying over the ocean or any other area at night. There's no concept of horizon. Now, when you have no concept of horizon, you don't know what your position is. You could be built flying sideways and you wouldn't know it. And that's exactly what they were doing. And out there on the plains, there's no lights, right? The ground is just like the sky or the horizon. It's all black. And the plane flew into the ground at a gradual descent, clipped off a smokestack on a little shack out in the field, and just continued flying down right into the ground. They didn't go like this, and they were flying at this angle probably and going right straight in.
The FAA, of course, got into an investigation of what happened. In those days, the word wind shear was not known. The initial blame, it seems, was put on the pilot, on Roger Peterson. And yet, when Jerry Dwyer and I have talked about this over the years, we both concluded, and I concluded this from the beginning, I don't believe that. There may have been a little difference in instrumentation, but Jerry Dwyer still runs that business, and he is a good man with that Dwyer flying service, and Roger Peterson would not have been sent out on that airplane had not Jerry known he could fly that airplane. There was some question about being checked out for night flying and whether a flight plan was given, and it wasn't, but it, in those days was not necessary, I guess. My feeling, and several others, and I think Jerry Dwyer would agree, that that plane took off and it hit the wind that was preceding that storm. And that light airplane, if that wind hit it from the top and Roger had the throttle open for takeoff, which is how they found it, that plane would be just driven right into the ground and ripped open, which it was. And it did severe damage to the guys in the airplane too, ripped them apart.
I don't think they've ever really come to a plain conclusion as to why the plane went down.
I turned around and left. I got in the car and drove about 2.5 blocks, and the cop pulled me over because I didn't make a stop. I told him what happened, and he had already heard about it. Took the keys from me and just walked up. And walked to the levee. I found the dog that wanted to get out from the levee. I helped him over the fence, and he followed me, and I spent about 2 days up there, a day and a half.
A couple of hours later, Tommy called me, and he told me they're not going to let us go to the funeral. We have to finish the tour. I'm sending the money. I've already bought your airplane tickets. I'm sending you some money for your pocket. Get on a cab, get to the airport, and come out here whether you can play or not.
My sisters, they had sent them over with one of my mother's friends. My mom was there. My ex-wife, Rosie, was with her.
I remember my mother being put in one of the family cars, and of course, you know, we're following Mama, and somebody saying, "No, you can't go with her. You have to go over here." And so the whole time it was just like, "Don't cry, because you're going to upset your mother. Don't cry, don't cry." So we didn't cry.
I remember, I remember being one of the pallbearers. I remember coming out of the church and seeing Donna. I didn't know Donna, never met her. And I seen her standing there for the first time. And then the ride to the cemetery. And
oh, the funeral, my goodness. I think that I can estimate about 5 miles of cars from the church to the cemetery. And I mean, a lot of people from all over the place they came, you know, to pay their respects.
Well, we just couldn't get around. There were so many people there that we just couldn't even get close to, you know, to the gravesite. Because the family's a real big family. You know, back then all the uncles and aunts were alive, cousins and nephews and nieces, and then the fan club too. You know, the fans that were there, and old friends that Connie had, new friends that they were neighbors of Connie that knew Ritchie. You know, Connie's age. So it was just like chaos, I guess, you know, just hundreds and hundreds of people.
But I remember Donna sharing with me, she goes, you know what, when I came to see your mom, she goes, I know you guys were really little, you guys don't remember, and you guys were just kind of pushed aside. She goes, but I remember people just walking in and out of Richie's room with stuff, just carrying it out. She goes, and there was nobody to stop them. She goes, because your mom was in no condition to even talk to anybody, and what were you kids going to do? She goes, I used to tell them to put it back, and they would just look at me like, who are you? But I would make them put it back.
a lot of these things I try to put out in my head. And Joni used to ask me, my wife, like you're asking, you know, what do you remember? What? I said, I used to tell her, I don't know, I lost about 3 days.
Back then, there was this big cultural thing when somebody died. You never played music, you didn't watch TV, you didn't do those things for a whole month because that was just part of the mourning and respect kind of thing. And people would come over and be aghast that my mother was playing Ritchie's music. And I used to get so mad, even as a little girl, and tell them, I wanted just to scream at them and tell them, don't you tell my mom she can't play his music. But my mom would look at them, and with just whatever little bit of strength she had, she would say, if I didn't listen to his music, I would die. Because I would have nothing to live for. And she played his music. And I remember the whole time she would just play one album after another. Our house was filled with his music afterwards. And I can remember her coming to me and telling me, don't cry anymore, go to bed. So I remember walking down the hall, you know, and it was dark, going to my little bed, and I didn't even turn on the light. Just getting in bed with my little blanket, you know, getting under the covers with the album, still holding it, and falling asleep. And in the morning I'd wake up, still holding the album, and we just cried. We would just cry.
We were doing, you know, fine, then all of a sudden Richie gets killed and you feel like somebody just pulled the rug out from underneath you. Like I said, I just lost faith in everything. Religion and I guess I was just angry. I didn't think it was fair, you know. I guess I didn't want to admit to myself that he was, you know, death is final, you know. So I couldn't accept his death, I guess, because then it would have been final, you know. I was in this, during one of these days, he's going to walk in from nowhere, you know, and tell me, yeah, here I am, you know.
As a child, I told myself that. I said, you know what, Richie is alive. He's not dead. He's not. He can't be dead. My brother can't be dead. He's just living in some farm someplace in Iowa. You know, one of these days he's going to remember who he is and he's going to come home. And that's what I made myself believe.
I don't know how you deal with the loss of people that you love and you have such high respect for. They die so young. I don't know how to deal with that. I didn't back then, and until recently, when I first came out here to California, I'd never seen Ritchie's grave. I went to visit it out here, and that was the first time I got a chance to cry.
Even now, I go to the cemetery, I can go any day of the week and somebody's always there. Or somebody leaves a paper, "We miss you, Richie." They leave little rocks or shells. I get them and I keep them, you know.
When Richie got killed, it sort of, I lost faith in everything, you know, for a while, and then jumped into my escape, which I knew that one already, you know, and back into the bottle again, because I was sober when Richie got killed. When he came home from Hawaii, and we had that party before he went on his last tour, he even offered me a drink, and I said no. He looked at me like, come on, man. Who are you kidding, you know? And I said, no.
I know he was loved by us very much. Richie was not just our brother. He was like, you know, part of our dad too. Did a lot for us. He did a lot for my mom.
Richie gave his life. I don't know what more a man can give. He gave his life for his music.
I used to think Iowa was this little dark, cold place that took my brother. And now it's Iowa, we have family there. And when we go back to the 50s.
Richie was the first, as I said before, Hispanic to cross over into pop music, and not all of his stuff was La Bamba type music. Richie was expanding, and I think his good looks, the fact he was only 17, he was writing his own stuff, he was adapting to other people's music to his style. I think there was probably 2-3 more decades of music that Richie Valens would have provided, and I suspect that he would have been writing music, composing music, maybe even had his own record company, which is where I think Buddy Holly would have been also. But certainly Richie was just beginning. I mean, his rocket ride was short, but it was taking off.
If that hadn't happened, Richie Valens would have been an interesting artist in that he could sing well and he could play that tremendous guitar.
And he was and would have proved to be a very, very phenomenal musician. Very well schooled and studied.
When Richie was doing what he was doing, he was living his dream. And you know what the really neat part is? He wasn't even sure what that was yet. And he never got to know.
And I don't think he ever really defined it in his mind. But it's just that he loved it, you know. He just loved that guitar. And he loved the music, the record, the sounds, the songs.
How can, after 40 years, his love for what he did still come through in that music?
I can go to anybody on the street, I don't care who it is and what their age is, and do you know the song La Bamba? La Bamba, of course. You know Delphi Records? No, I don't know, I think do you know Richie Valens? Richie Valens, yeah.
To say Richie was rock and roll, I don't think it's, I mean, there was a lot of people who were rock and roll. Chuck Berry, Elvis Presley, Fats Domino, Bill Haley. I mean, that's rock and roll.
Rock and roll was here to stay.
Energy. Good grief.
So these girls went wild over him.
He knew what he wanted right from the beginning.
He played incredible guitar.
There ain't too much you can say about Richie that was derogatory.
Everybody liked this guy.
He was a neat guy. He was a good guy.
My mother always used to say, "Come on, let's go, Richie."
That's why his stuff is so great, is because he wasn't limited by tradition or by musical whatever, you know. It was what he felt from the beginning, and I just let him go. I didn't want to influence him in any way. I just wanted to try to capture what he had to say from what he felt.
She's my one and only, she's my heart desire.
And his music is never gonna die.
She's a real upsetter, she's a real live wire.
He was just a happy, lucky kid.
Everybody turns when my baby goes by.
Did a lot for us. He did a lot for my mom.
She's something to see that really catches the eye.
Rock and roll will never die.
Well, I love her, she loves me. Oh, how happy now we can be. Making love on a knee.
We took him to Pacific Ocean Park, and I don't know why he was nervous that day, but he says, "Uncle, let me have a cigarette." So he got a cigarette and he smoked, and we got off. He was smoking it, and we went through the place, you know, when you go in, and he flicked the cigarette before we went in, and they seen him, and they knew that Richie Valens was there. They knew who he was, and all these girls jumped. In fact, one girl has called me about 3 years ago. She goes, "I still have Richie's cigarette."
And the man was a genius. Because how many people do you know that are 17 years old and know what they want to do with the rest of their life? You know? I did. At 37 years old, I didn't know what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. I loved the man. I never told her so. Yeah.
Stay beside me, here beside me. Stay beside me day after day. When I'm feeling blue, let me look at you. Oh, my darling, please won't you say you'll stay beside me, help and guide me, never, never leave me alone. Trust and love me, be proud of me. Let me keep your heart for my own. With your love, you make me strong. Come to me where you belong. Stay beside me, close beside me. You must know it's you I adore. You were